The judge laughed when a 17-year-old walked into court claiming to be a lawyer. But no one was laughing when he exposed the truth and flipped the entire case upside down. What happened next left the entire courtroom, and the world, completely speechless. This isn't fiction, this is real, and you won't believe how it ends. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and a teenage boy stepped into the courtroom. His shoes, worn-out sneakers, let out a faint squeak as they met the gleaming, polished wood floor. Every head in the room turned toward the sound, and just like that, all eyes were on him. He didn't look like he belonged. He wasn't wearing a suit. He didn't have a briefcase, no tie, no legal assistant in tow. Just a plain beige t-shirt, a pair of faded jeans, and a focused look in his eyes that most mistook for fear. He couldn't have been older than 17, maybe even younger. The gallery, packed with sharply dressed lawyers, journalists, and court officers, murmured in confusion. Some raised eyebrows, a few exchanged amused glances. What was a kid doing here? Was he lost? Was he someone's younger sibling? Or just a kid looking for a viral TikTok? At the front of the courtroom, seated high on his bench, Judge Ronald Whitaker adjusted his glasses. His silver hair was neatly combed back, and his black robe draped elegantly across his shoulders. A man known for his zero tolerance for nonsense. Whitaker had presided over this courtroom for more than 40 years, and in that time, he had seen many things, but nothing quite like this. The judge's voice cut through the silence like a blade. This is a courtroom, young man, not a playground. Where is your lawyer? The teenager didn't look away. He took another step forward. His posture was calm, almost too calm. And as the sunlight from the towering windows caught his face, a thin scar across his forehead came into view. He cleared his throat, then spoke. Clear, confident, and without hesitation. I'm representing myself, Your Honor. The silence snapped like a rubber band. Laughter broke out. Audible chuckles from the rows behind him. One attorney leaned toward another and whispered, "Is this some kind of prank?" A woman in the back, her voice a bit too loud, muttered, "This kid's got a death wish." Even the bailiff cracked a smile before catching himself. But Judge Whitaker didn't smile. His eyes narrowed. He studied the boy for a long moment, before slowly leaning forward over the bench. "You're not a lawyer," he said with deliberate disdain. "You can't even shave yet." The courtroom buzzed again, snickering, whispers. A camera from a local news crew swiveled in the boy's direction. Everyone was waiting for him to crack, to apologize, to admit he was in over his head. But he didn't flinch. He didn't step back. Instead, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded set of legal documents, clearly marked and stamped. With slow, steady steps, he approached the front desk and handed them to the court clerk. "My name is Malik Johnson," he said. "I've passed the bar examination in the state of Vermont, and I've filed all appropriate paperwork to represent the defendant, Jamal Johnson, my brother. Everything has been cleared, and I'm here to make sure justice is served." The clerk's eyebrows lifted as he scanned the documents. A hush fell once again. Even Judge Whitaker looked momentarily caught off guard. "Is this real?" the clerk whispered. The judge gestured for the papers, read them over, and adjusted his glasses again. The seal was official. The credentials, shockingly, were valid. The young man had legally passed the bar through an obscure online program, offered by an accredited university. He had graduated at 16, a prodigy. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted from amusement to disbelief. Still, the judge wasn't ready to concede. "Even if this is legitimate," Whitaker said, his tone firm, "this is no place for games. The stakes here are serious. Your brother is facing prison. You really think you can handle this?" Malik looked up at the judge, expression unreadable. "I didn't come here to play games, Your Honor. I came here because nobody else believed in my brother's innocence." I came here because the public defender gave up before the case even began. I came here because I know the truth, and I have the evidence to prove it. All I need is a fair chance. You could have heard a pin drop. Across the room, the prosecutor, an experienced, stone-faced attorney named Mr. Hargrove, leaned forward in his chair. He looked annoyed, almost insulted by the spectacle. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous," he snapped. "Are we really going to allow a child to argue a case against the state?" The judge held up his hand for silence. He looked down at Malik again. There was something in the boy's eyes. Determination, control, intelligence, and something deeper, like he'd already been through more than most adults in that room. Whitaker sighed slowly. "Mr. Johnson," he said finally, "you've got one chance, but know this, I run a serious courtroom. You will follow every rule, every order, and every deadline. Do I make myself clear?" Malik nodded once. "Crystal clear, Your Honor." And just like that, the trial began. People who had planned to leave early stayed in their seats. Reporters who had come for a routine case now prepped their cameras. Every eye was fixed on the teenager who had just stood toe-to-toe with a seasoned judge and didn't blink. No one knew what was coming next. But one thing was certain. This wasn't going to be just another court case. Everyone in the courtroom thought it was a joke. A teenage boy, barely old enough to vote, standing in front of a judge and claiming to be a licensed defense attorney? That was unheard of. It sounded like the setup for a prank video or a legal disaster waiting to happen. But this case wasn't a joke. The young man's name was Malik Johnson, and what most people didn't realize, at least not yet, was that this teenager wasn't the one on trial. He was the one defending it. The actual defendant was sitting just a few feet behind him, Jamal Johnson, Malik's older brother. A quiet, soft-spoken man in his early 20s, Jamal had been charged with a long list of cybercrimes: fraud, identity theft, unauthorized access to private databases, and impersonation. The charges were serious enough that, if convicted, he could face up to 25 years in federal prison. The prosecutors claimed Jamal had hacked into a corporate database and redirected over $100,000 into offshore accounts. They had IP logs, they had email records, they even had screenshots. To most people, the evidence seemed airtight. Everyone thought Jamal was guilty. Everyone, except Malik. A genius in disguise. What nobody expected was that Malik Johnson wasn't just a loyal little brother. He was a certified genius. He had started college at age 13 through an online accelerated learning program. By 15, he had earned a bachelor's degree in computer science. By 16, he had discovered a legal loophole that allowed bar exam eligibility without traditional law school in the state of Vermont. He took the exam and passed. After months of research, paperwork, and preparation, Malik was officially licensed to practice law. His first case? Defend his brother, personally. He filed the paperwork himself, structured the legal defense strategy, and even responded to the pre-trial motions like a seasoned pro. But when he walked into the courtroom that day, dressed like a regular teenager, no suit, no tie, nobody took him seriously. The court doesn't believe him. The moment Malik announced that he was serving as his brother's legal counsel, the courtroom exploded in confusion. The prosecution team began whispering aggressively among themselves. The gallery gasped. Judge Whitaker blinked twice before lifting his gavel and calling for silence. Then came the demand. "Clerk," the judge said, "verify his credentials. Immediately." The clerk, half skeptical and half curious, took the documents Malik had submitted and began digging. Meanwhile, the assistant district attorney, Mr. Gregory Hargrove, a man known for crushing young attorneys and never losing a case, stood up and shouted, "This is absurd! A child representing someone in a felony case? This court is being mocked. We are not letting a teenager, who probably just learned how to drive, stand up here and argue against the state." The judge didn't respond immediately. Instead, he waited for the clerk to return with confirmation. And then, the bombshell dropped. "Your Honor," the clerk said, reading from the computer screen, "his license is valid. He passed the Vermont bar exam at age 16 and has filed all necessary motions and paperwork. Everything checks out. The courtroom froze. Even Mr. Hargrove fell silent. The state pushes back, but silence didn't last long. The prosecutor was seething, his pride wounded. He leaned over his desk and snapped, "Credentials or not, Your Honor, this is highly irregular. He has no courtroom experience, no mentorship, no law firm behind him. This is a murder of due process. How can we allow this to proceed?" Judge Whitaker stared down at Malik from the bench. He was still clearly doubtful. A part of him probably agreed with the prosecutor, but the law was the law. Malik had done everything by the book. So the judge leaned back in his chair and spoke carefully. "Mr. Johnson, the court will allow you to proceed, for now. But understand this is a felony trial. If I see even a hint of misconduct, inexperience, or grandstanding, I will remove you immediately. Are we clear?" Malik nodded calmly. "Crystal clear, Your Honor." Hargrove smirked. "Then prepare to lose, son. This isn't some spelling bee. We don't go easy on amateurs." But Malik didn't flinch. He turned toward the prosecutor with the kind of calm confidence that made the whole room take notice. There was no fear in his voice, just truth. "Then I suggest you prepare, sir," he said, "because I didn't come here to play lawyer. I came here with the truth, and I plan to expose yours." The entire courtroom went dead silent again. Wasn't playing games. What they didn't know, what they were about to find out, was that Malik hadn't just memorized laws. He had studied every aspect of the prosecution's case. He had already identified holes in their timeline. He had traced IP addresses they claimed belonged to his brother and discovered they were spoofed. He had located technical evidence they had overlooked and had subpoenaed the records before the trial even began. This wasn't some foolish teenager swinging wildly at the justice system. This was a calculated, razor-sharp mind coming to war, and behind him, his brother Jamal finally smiled for the first time in months, because for the first time, someone was fighting for him. On the second day of trial, everything changed. The courtroom, which had started this case in doubt and mockery, now sat in silence, hanging on every word from a teenager they had once laughed at. Malik Johnson, barely 17, no suit, no law firm behind him, stood at the front of the courtroom like he'd been there his entire life. No fidgeting, no nervous stammer, just poise, presence, and purpose. And that morning, he came with evidence, stacks of it. Malik laid out a full timeline of events with precision. He presented digital evidence logs, showing every login, email trace, and IP address that had been used in the alleged cybercrime. He projected timestamps, compared data records, and highlighted discrepancies, all of which pointed to one fact. His brother Jamal couldn't have committed the crime. He moved around the courtroom like a veteran attorney, asking concise questions, speaking directly to the jury, and reading the reactions in the room like a master strategist. According to the prosecution, this transaction took place at 2:14 p.m., Malik said, pointing to the giant screen. But the server log clearly shows this activity originating at 2:11 p.m. from a completely different IP address, one that belongs to a public Wi-Fi network across town. That's a 3-minute difference, and an entirely different location. The jury leaned in. Even the judge seemed visibly intrigued. Then came cross-examination. Malik called a digital forensic expert from the prosecution's team to the stand. With calm, respectful questioning, he dismantled the state's own narrative. He asked the expert to explain server bounce-back behaviors, IP spoofing, and login anomalies. "Would you agree," Malik asked, "that with the right tools, someone could impersonate another user's IP address, especially if that user's data had been stolen weeks earlier?" The expert hesitated. "In theory, yes." "Not just theory," Malik replied. "It's exactly what happened here." The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Objection, Your Honor. He's leading the witness." Judge Whitaker, who had started the trial with open skepticism, paused. Then he leaned back slowly and said, "Overruled. He's correct." Continue, Mr. Johnson. The courtroom shifted. A low murmur spread among the spectators. Even some of the prosecution's team looked uncertain. This teenager, once dismissed as a child playing dress-up, had just outmaneuvered a paid expert witness and a veteran prosecutor in front of a jury. A critical discovery. Then came the moment that changed everything. Malik had spent nights digging through video footage from the corporate building, allegedly hacked by Jamal. The prosecution had shown clips during the first day of trial, security footage of someone at a workstation at the exact time of the breach. Their argument? That person was Jamal. But Malik saw something they missed. He played the same footage again. Only this time, he enhanced the timestamps and froze the clip at the critical moment. "Your Honor," Malik said, "please note the timestamp." The prosecution said the breach happened at 2:14 p.m. But this footage, right here, cuts off at 2:11 p.m. and doesn't resume until 2:17. That's a 6-minute gap. We have no footage of the actual crime taking place. He let the silence speak for itself. Then he dropped another bombshell. I cross-checked the server logs from the company's own database. The firewall was disabled at 2:13 p.m., but this room was completely dark during that time. Someone deliberately edited out that footage. My client wasn't there. He was being framed. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The jury's eyes widened. Reporters in the back began whispering frantically. Pens scribbled across notepads. The prosecutor looked stunned. He whispered something to his assistant, but his body language said it all. They missed it. The kid found what an entire legal team had overlooked. The world takes notice. During recess, the courtroom hallways buzzed with a new energy. Reporters had shown up. Word had started to spread. Local news cameras lined up outside. People whispered, in disbelief, "Is this real? Who is this kid? Is he some kind of prodigy?" A TV anchor standing on the courthouse steps delivered a live update. "We're following an unprecedented case where a 17-year-old, Malik Johnson, is defending his older brother in court, and not just holding his own, but dominating the courtroom. Today, he exposed a critical hole in the prosecution's evidence. The mood in the courtroom has shifted dramatically. Inside, people who had doubted Malik just 24 hours earlier were now rooting for him. Some jurors nodded with growing respect. Even Judge Whitaker, known for being cold and inflexible, had softened. And Mr. Hargrove, the prosecution's top bulldog, he looked worried. He wasn't just fighting a case. He was making history. That day, Malik didn't just argue a case, he owned the courtroom. With every objection sustained, every contradiction revealed, and every doubt he sowed in the prosecution's case, Malik proved he wasn't just some kid with a dream. He was a once-in-a-generation legal mind with the courage to go toe-to-toe with a system that never gave him or his brother a chance. And behind him, Jamal, his brother, his client, and his reason, sat quietly, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time since his arrest, he had hope. Hope not because of some high-priced lawyer. Hope because of Malik Johnson, the teenage genius the world almost ignored. By the third day of trial, something strange was happening, something no one expected. Judge Ronald Whitaker, once skeptical and dismissive, had stopped rolling his eyes. He no longer interrupted Malik mid-sentence or gave him the cold, patronizing glare he was known for. Instead, the judge listened closely. It was as if the courtroom itself had changed. Temperature. The boy they had mocked was now commanding total respect. Behind closed doors, in the privacy of his chambers, Judge Whitaker turned to his clerk and said something that revealed just how much his opinion had shifted. "I mocked that boy," the judge admitted. "But I've never seen anyone dismantle a case like this. He might be the real deal." And he was right. Because what came next wasn't just smart lawyering. It was a game-changing revelation. The real hacker court resumed after the morning break. The prosecution seemed ready to double down, hoping to salvage what remained of their unraveling case. But Malik Johnson had other plans. He stood at the front of the courtroom and took a deep breath. He looked the jury straight in the eyes. His voice was calm, confident, yet heavy with purpose. "Your Honor," he began, "with the court's permission, I'd like to submit new evidence. Evidence that will show this case is not only flawed, but entirely false." The room tensed. Malik walked over to the projector screen and began clicking through a series of encrypted email logs. Then he pulled up a digital map showing login histories and device IDs. "Over the last 3 weeks," Malik said, "I've worked with independent cybersecurity analysts to trace the IP addresses tied to the breach. What we found was shocking." He clicked again. A second screen showed login pings from 2 different states, one from their hometown and another from Nevada, hundreds of miles away. The Nevada logins matched the exact time of the data breach, and more importantly, came from a device never owned by Jamal. "The real perpetrator," Malik continued, "is Brandon Keller, a former IT contractor for the same corporation that's accusing my brother." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. "Keller was fired nearly a year ago for inappropriate access to internal systems," Malik explained, "but he retained backdoor access. He used my brother's credentials, stolen from an old laptop, to execute the breach. Then he redirected the stolen funds into shell accounts, registered under fake names." He paused. "But what he didn't count on was me finding his digital fingerprints." The entire courtroom was frozen. The smoking gun Malik presented the final blow. He submitted a copy of an encrypted email recovered from a cloud storage account linked to Keller. The email contained not just evidence of the transfer, but also a line that read, "Using Jamal's ID again. Worked last time. They'll never suspect a thing." It was a smoking gun. The judge read the line out loud. Some jurors gasped. The prosecutor sat motionless, lips tight, hands trembling slightly. Malik turned toward the jury one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just a case about mistaken identity. It's a case about a system that failed to look deeper. My brother is innocent, and the truth was always out there. We just had to fight hard enough to find it." Then he returned to his seat. It was a mic drop moment, the kind you don't forget. The courtroom reacts. For a long time, no one moved. Judge Whitaker stared down at the papers in front of him, the evidence Malik had submitted now stacked neatly beside his gavel. He looked up slowly, his voice softer than it had been all week. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, addressing the prosecutor, "do you have a rebuttal?" But Hargrove looked pale. He shuffled through his notes, then shook his head. "Not at this time, Your Honor." The judge turned to Malik. "Mr. Johnson, anything further?" Malik stood, his voice steady. "Defense rests, Your Honor." And with that, the courtroom fell into a charged silence. Jamal sat behind him, eyes wide with disbelief. His younger brother had just cracked open a case that was supposed to bury him. A woman in the gallery whispered, "Did that kid just clear his brother's name?" Another man said, "This boy's gonna be famous." A reputation is born outside. News cameras were now lined up by the dozen. People streamed the trial online. Social media blew up with hashtags like Chateen Lawyer, Justice for Jamal, and Malik the Mind. Commentators on TV couldn't believe what they were watching. "This is history," one legal analyst said. "We've never seen anything like it. A 17-year-old not only taking on a felony case, but winning it." Inside the courthouse, the jury began deliberations. The atmosphere was tense, but hopeful. Malik didn't pace or panic. He simply sat with his brother, hand on his shoulder, waiting, because he knew what the outcome would be. The verdict approaches. Judge Whitaker, who once tried to dismiss Malik as a child, now watched him with a strange mix of pride and awe. Whatever his decision would be, one thing was clear. This trial was no longer about guilt or innocence. It was about truth, courage, and a teenager who refused to be underestimated. The final day had arrived. After 3 grueling days of cross-examinations, digital evidence, and an emotional roller coaster inside that courtroom, all eyes were on one thing now: the verdict. The air was thick with tension. Spectators sat forward in their seats. The jury, after hours of deliberation, filed back into the room with stone-faced expressions. Not a whisper was heard as everyone stood. Malik Johnson stood tall beside his brother Jamal at the defense table. No fancy suit, no legal entourage. Just the same calm, focused teen in a plain beige t-shirt, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the jury foreman. The judge looked down. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, holding a folded paper in his hand. "We have, Your Honor." The clerk took the slip and handed it to Judge Whitaker. He opened it slowly, read silently, then looked up. A pause, a beat of silence, and then, "On the charge of cyber fraud, we find the defendant not guilty." The room erupted. It was like an explosion of emotion. People in the gallery gasped, then broke into cheers. A woman near the back began crying. Jamal, overcome with relief, grabbed his brother and pulled him into a tight embrace. His body shook with sobs as he repeated, "You did it. You saved me. You saved me." Even the courtroom deputies, trained to stay stoic, shared subtle smiles. Reporters dashed from the room to deliver the breaking news. Court TV networks cut to live broadcasts. On Twitter and TikTok, the moment went viral within minutes. But inside the courtroom, the most unexpected moment was still to come. An unexpected honor. Judge Whitaker pounded the gavel several times for order, though his voice had softened. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must ask for quiet, though today I can understand the celebration." He looked down at Malik, and this time there was no sarcasm, no skepticism, only genuine respect. "Mr. Johnson," the judge began, "when you first walked into this courtroom, I'll admit, I didn't take you seriously. I thought you were reckless, naive, maybe even foolish." He paused. "But today, I owe you an apology. Because not only did you demonstrate a mastery of the law, you exposed truth, you protected the innocent, and you carried yourself with dignity far beyond your years." The judge took a breath. "You are, without question, one of the finest legal minds I've seen in this courtroom, and you've only just begun." The room fell silent again, this time in awe. Then something rare happened. The entire courtroom stood up. A full standing ovation. Attorneys, reporters, spectators, even rival counsel. Malik, wide-eyed and humbled, looked around as people clapped, nodded, and whispered his name like legend. Jamal placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "You changed my life, man, and probably a lot of others too." The aftermath. A star is born. That afternoon, headlines hit every major outlet. Teen lawyer shocks legal system. Young genius outsmarts entire courtroom. 17-year-old dismantles prosecution in real-life legal drama. Talk shows covered the story. Podcasts analyzed his arguments. TikTokers edited courtroom clips to dramatic music with captions like, "You just watched greatness." Law schools around the country sent open invitations to Malik, and yet, he disappeared from the spotlight just as quickly as he entered it. He didn't do it for fame. Malik turned down interviews. He didn't sign a book deal. He didn't cash in on viral fame. Instead, he quietly returned to his modest home, where textbooks and case files still cluttered his small desk. He kept studying, kept learning, preparing for whatever came next. He knew this wasn't the end of his journey, just the beginning. What mattered most wasn't the applause or the headlines. It was Jamal's freedom. It was proving that truth wins when someone is brave enough to fight for it. The legacy to this day, people still talk about that trial. Law professors teach it as a case study in critical thinking and courtroom strategy. Students quote Malik's cross-examinations. And judges around the country recall how one teenager changed their view of what justice can look like. Even Judge Whitaker, in a later interview, said, "He taught us that the law isn't about age or appearance or tradition. It's about truth and courage." Final words. Malik Johnson may not have stuck around for the spotlight, but for everyone who sat in that courtroom, for every person who watched the trial online, for every doubter who saw a kid and assumed he didn't belong, they'll never forget what happened in that courtroom, because they didn't just witness a verdict, they witnessed history in the making. Final message for your video. Never judge a book by its cover, and never underestimate the power of preparation, passion, and purpose. If you were the judge, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping real-life stories.